15 years ago, Isabela Oliveira's fingers glided gracefully across the piano keys at Carnegie Hall, while critics predicted her overwhelming success. Today, those same hands cleaned the bathrooms of the Moretti mansion, where she had become a master in the art of hiding. When billionaire Alfonso Moretti, with his sarcastic tone, offered his black employees, hired to entertain at his charity event, his daughter Eliana laughed, both relishing the humiliation that had been promised. But when old rumors about Isabela's past resurfaced and a former mentor emerged from the shadows, the forgotten prodigy had to choose: remain invisible and safe, or return to the music that was once the voice of her soul. The high society guests were there for entertainment, but no one was prepared for what would leave them speechless. Before we return, share with us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, be sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I have something really special in store for you. Isabela Oliveira, once a promising piano prodigy, enchanted audiences at Carnegie Hall. At just 13 years old, her performances were acclaimed by critics and admirers alike. Music flowed like a river in her soul, effortlessly, without limits. But cruel fate had a tragedy in store for her: the early death of her mother. Without financial and emotional support, Isabela disappeared from the music world, burying her dreams along with her. Now 28, Isabela is no longer the star of the stage, but a silent maid in the Moretti mansion. She wakes up early, takes care of the house, cleans the floors, and arranges the furniture, invisible to the eyes of the wealthy family. Her dark gray uniform, always impeccable, is the cloak that hides her. Alfonso Moretti's children, Eliana and Enrique, rarely notice her presence. Isabela is not only ignored, but erased, as if her story never existed. However, music has never abandoned her. Every chord, every melody, is engraved in her memory like invisible tattoos on her soul. In moments of solitude, when silence fills the house, Isabela feels the urge to return to the piano, even if only in her mind. She imagines the keys under her fingers, the melody of Chopin or one of her own compositions. But the fear of loss, the fear of being seen again as the young girl full of promise, paralyzes her. The past is a constant shadow, never completely disappearing. In every corner of the mansion, in every gesture of her daily routine, it is there, waiting. When the sound of a piano echoes from the living room, Isabela finds herself transported back to her old life. For a moment, she is the young prodigy again, but soon reality pulls her back, and she sees herself once more as the maid, hidden in the vastness of her own pain. Alfonso Moretti, a 64-year-old billionaire, doesn't care about the lives of those who serve in his mansion. To him, all his employees are just cogs in his machine. His world is made up of glitz, luxury, and status. Through his foundation, he organizes charity events, but his real interest is in showing off his power. For him, every gesture has a calculated purpose. When he decided to hold a charity ball, he didn't expect that event to change his life. Isabela, as always, was a shadow at the event. While the guests feasted and talked about art and money, she took care of the invisible part, tidying up the room, cleaning the cutlery, arranging the flowers. For her, there was no place in the world of entertainment for the rich. Her only desire was to go unnoticed, not to attract attention, not to be seen as anything more than an employee. However, at that event, something would change. A glance from a guest, a casual comment, would be enough to change everything. Eliana Moretti, Alfonso's daughter, had eyes well trained to notice any deviation from the established order. She noticed everything: the sparkle in the guests' eyes, the upright posture of the employees, and especially Isabela's position. She never hid her contempt. When she saw Isabela at the gala, serving with her usual discretion, Eliana made a sarcastic comment about the hidden talents among the employees. But as always, no one cared. Everyone laughed, ignoring the implied humiliation. The event took an unexpected turn when a former mentor of Isabela's appeared. Elliot Santana, a music critic who had witnessed her rise to fame, was among the guests. Hearing his name mentioned, something stirred inside her. She was no longer the talented young woman he had known, but a ghost of what she had been. A brief glance between the two revealed mutual recognition. Elliot didn't understand why Isabela was there, silent, far from the stage, far from her real life. Isabela never forgot the days when the piano was her only language, her only way of communicating with the world. As a child, she enchanted audiences with her mastery of the keys. Leonard Tucker, one of the biggest names in jazz, had been her mentor, helping her to integrate the classical and jazz worlds in a unique way. Music seemed to flow naturally, but the tragedy of her mother's death took her away from everything, burying the promise of a brilliant career. Lázaro Silva, Isabela's mentor, always believed in her talent, even when the world seemed not to see her. He guided her through the complex harmonies of jazz, believing that she had the power to unite two distinct musical worlds. Their relationship was not just that of teacher and student, but a genuine friendship. When her mother fell ill, Lázaro tried to help, but life forced her to choose between music and survival. With the death of her mother, Isabela stopped playing. The piano, once an extension of herself, became a painful reminder of everything she had lost. The notes that once flowed so easily became distant, unattainable. Silence filled the space where music once existed. Isabela withdrew from everyone except her daily routine at the Moretti mansion, where her life consisted of being invisible to others in a world without melodies. Over time, Isabela accepted her new fate. Music became a distant memory, and she abandoned it completely. There was no more room in her life for dreams that seemed impossible to achieve. She moved on, doing her best in her daily tasks, erasing the marks of the past. When someone talked about music, she fell silent. There was no more room for the young prodigy. Isabela was now just an employee. In her lonely moments, the figure of Lázaro Silva never disappeared from Isabela's mind. He always said, "Music is your soul, Isabela. Never let life erase it." Even after his departure, her mentor's words echoed in her mind. During the silent nights at the Moretti mansion, Isabela felt his absence like an invisible force that compelled her to look at the piano and wonder if she could regain what was once hers. The grand piano stood there, imposing, in the mansion's living room, and Isabela avoided looking at it. It was easier to forget her true identity, the young prodigy, when it was out of sight. But the music never stopped whispering. During the charity ball, upon hearing the distant sound of a melody being played on the piano, Isabela found herself paralyzed. It was as if, for a moment, the music of her youth had returned to claim what was hers. Then, out of the blue, the invitation came. During the evening, Alfonso Moretti, indifferent to his maid's emotions, announced casually, "You can play for us at the gala, Isabela. Let's see if you can still impress us." Those words cut through the silence. Isabela's stomach tightened. How could she accept? How could she return to the stage without everything she had lost? Doubt consumed her, but there was no choice. Fear paralyzed her. The stage, that place where her soul had shone, now looked like a battlefield. How could she expose herself again after so many years of silence? The weight of expectation seemed overwhelming. Being seen again was not something she wanted, but there was something inside her that refused to let the music die. It was a battle between what she had lost and what she could achieve. And deep down, she knew it was time to start over. Alfonso Moretti didn't care about Isabela's feelings. His focus was on image and prestige. Organizing a charity event was more of an opportunity to show off his greatness than a genuine act of charity. He barely noticed the tension around him, because what really mattered was displaying his wealth and power. For him, the gala was just another spectacle, and Isabela, with her silent presence, was just a detail in the grandeur of the evening. Eliana, Alfonso's daughter, was thrilled at the idea that the party would be the center of attention for high society. But for her, nothing was more fun than having fun at the expense of others. When she realized that Isabela would be forced to perform, she couldn't hide her malicious smile. "Who knows? Maybe she'll surprise us," she said sarcastically. She knew it would be fun to see someone she saw as insignificant try to fit into that world of wealth and ostentation. Renato Pereira, the property manager, always followed Alfonso's orders, but at that moment he seemed eager for something more. He knew that Isabela's presence on stage could generate some reaction, but he didn't know what to expect. He was aware of the importance of maintaining the apparent perfection of the evening and, in an unexpected gesture, began to pressure Isabela, telling her that her performance had to be flawless. Renato's words were more pressure than encouragement. Isabela felt the weight of his expectations. Isabela felt the ground opening up beneath her feet. Every word, every glance, made her want to disappear. She knew she would be judged. The only thing she wanted was to remain invisible, as she always had been. But something inside her was beginning to break down that armor. The piano in the living room, the challenge of performing, were reminders of who she had been. No matter how hard she tried to hide, her essence, her music, began to resonate within her, challenging her own resistance. Isabela, now more than ever, felt like a shadow inside the grand mansion. Each day was a repetition of the previous one. Cleaning, organizing, being invisible. She moved as if she weren't there, her actions an almost mechanical routine. The contrast between her position and the Moretti's luxury was a constant reminder of who she had become. Instead of shining, she camouflaged herself in the opulence that surrounded her, becoming part of the scenery, like a piece of furniture. The other employees, although respectful, kept a cordial distance. Some admired her efficiency, but few really knew her. Isabela spoke little, as if afraid of being noticed. Claudia, the housekeeper, was one of the few who genuinely cared about her, but even Claudia understood that, in the Moretti household, everyone had a place to occupy. Isabela was no different. She had always been treated with respect, but also with the indifference that comes from invisibility. Enrique, Alfonso's son, always felt uncomfortable with the dynamics of the house. He never liked how people were treated, but he didn't know how to change it. When he saw Isabela, always reserved, his mind tried to understand if there was more to her than met the eye. He was sure that the woman who cleaned other people's houses was not the same person he had seen in the music records. But he didn't know what to do with this growing doubt. Eliana, on the other hand, noticed everything with a sharp and disdainful gaze. Unlike her brother, she knew exactly what each employee in the house represented, and Isabela, to her, was nothing more than a maid. Her appearance at the gala was a risk Eliana was willing to take. She would do anything to show everyone that this world of musicality and talent was not for people like Isabela. She was determined to maintain order. Enrique could no longer ignore the fact that something was strange. The relationship between Isabela and music was evident, even though she tried to hide it. One night, as he watched her tidying up the living room, he noticed her gaze fixed on the piano, as if the music was calling her. Enrique felt an unexpected connection. He knew that Isabela had something more, but he couldn't understand why she had distanced herself from everything that was hers. In the days that followed, Enrique began to observe Isabela more closely. She moved around the house like a shadow, always discreet, but he noticed the small details, the way her fingers curved, how her eyes closed when she heard music, the way she seemed to breathe more deeply when someone played the piano. A growing curiosity took hold of him, but he still didn't know what to do with it. His mind was filled with unanswered questions. Enrique, intrigued, decided to approach Isabela. On a quiet afternoon, he found her in the hallway, near the piano. "You play, don't you?" he asked cautiously. Isabela, visibly uncomfortable, looked at him with the expression of someone trying to hide from their own past. I don't play anymore, sir," she replied in a low voice. But Enrique was not satisfied with that answer. He knew there was more there, something Isabela was not willing to reveal. Enrique, determined, picked up his guitar and approached the piano, as if wanting to break the silence that hung between them. "I know you still feel the music inside you, Isabela," he said softly. Isabela hesitated, but something in his tone made her stay. She approached the piano, her fingers gently touching the keys, as if she were playing what was left of her soul. Enrique watched in silence, now aware that something much bigger was being hidden. "Before we return, share with us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, be sure to subscribe, because tomorrow I have something really special prepared for you." Eliana had always known how to manipulate situations to her advantage, and her ability to perceive others' weaknesses was her greatest weapon. Upon learning that Isabela would be performing at the gala, Eliana devised a plan to have some fun with the situation. She saw Isabela as nothing more than an opportunity to humiliate her in front of everyone. Eliana never understood Isabela's true talent, but she knew she could use it to her own advantage. In Eliana's view, the idea of an employee performing for a wealthy audience was absurd. To her, people like Isabela were mere tools, destined to serve, not to shine. The charity gala was the perfect stage to show her friends how far the world of the rich and powerful was from accepting people like Isabela, a woman of humble origins, in the spotlight. Everything had to be under her control. Eliana knew that by making jokes about Isabela, she would make everyone uncomfortable and control the narrative of the evening. She enjoyed the idea of exposing Isabela, of making her look pathetic. By sarcastically commenting to her friends about Isabela's musical talent, she sought to divert attention from any real ability Isabela might have. Will she charm us with a piece by Mozart? I hope it's something more simple, Eliana said dismissively. Eliana was determined to make sure her fun was had. She manipulated everyone around her, including her father, Alfonso. She knew that Isabela's presence on stage would put her in a vulnerable position. The power of the Moretti family, the wealth, the influential guests, all of it would be used to show that the real world had no place for people like Isabela. Eliana felt in control of the narrative and knew that, once again, everyone would play along with her game. Isabela never imagined that her encounter with Elliot Santana, the music critic, would happen again under these circumstances. The same man who had witnessed her rise as a young pianist now stood before her, but as a distant figure, a spectator on the stage of her life. He watched her silently, as if he knew what she was carrying inside, but something in his eyes indicated that he still believed in her ability to shine again. The sight of Elliot brought back forgotten memories. The young woman she had been before the tragedy, the promise that had dissipated under the weight of hardship. Lazaro Silva had believed in her, and so had Elliot. But what had happened to that young woman who had lost her way? Isabela didn't want to confront that past now. Her heart was heavy, but she knew she couldn't hide forever. Elliot knew something she was afraid to admit. She still had the power of music. The fear of exposing herself was uncontrollable. Isabela felt a deep pain when she thought about returning to the stage, even in front of an audience that might not understand her. Her mind was filled with images of her mother, of mourning, of the struggle to survive after her loss. How could she give herself over to music again, when that same art had been the cause of her suffering? Every part of her soul screamed in conflict, trying to find a reason to play again. But the music was always there, waiting. She knew she needed to play again. Isabela felt the music deep within her, like a flame that would not be extinguished. The piano was the only place where she could find herself. If it weren't for music, what would become of her? Every lost chord, every forgotten melody, were pieces of her soul that she needed to rescue. The stage, the gala, the stairs, they were just obstacles. The real struggle was with herself. Eliana, immersed in her own frustration and envy, realized Isabela's vulnerability when she learned of her decision to play at the gala. She couldn't bear the idea of being surpassed by someone she saw as inferior. So, in an act of cruelty, she took Isabela's original sheet music, planning to destroy it to ensure that the young woman would have no chance to shine. Eliana knew that without her sheet music, Isabela would not be able to perform properly. When Isabela realized that her sheet music was missing, anguish took her by surprise. Her life's work, her emotions and stories stored in those pages, were now lost. Desperate, she searched the entire mansion, rummaging through drawers and bookshelves, but found nothing. However, something inside her urged her not to give up. In the kitchen trash can, under piles of garbage, she found her torn sheet music. They were damaged, but still intact, like a second chance for her music. With the sheet music restored, Isabela felt a renewed sense of hope, although her heart was still heavy. The torn pages, stained with coffee and tears, seemed to reflect her own state of mind. She knew this was her last chance. If she could reconnect with music, perhaps she could regain her essence. But doubt still lingered. Was she ready to face the audience? And more importantly, would she be able to free herself from the fear that had imprisoned her for so many years? While Isabela worked, immersed in the sheet music, Elliot quietly appeared in the room. He had been following Isabela's footsteps, knowing the challenge she was facing. "You don't have to hide anything anymore, Isabela. I know who you are," he said, breaking the silence she had built around her. Isabela stopped and stared at him, not knowing how to react. She couldn't lie to herself anymore. The moment of truth was near, and she was closer than ever to setting herself free. The big night of the gala had arrived, and the Moretti mansion was resplendent, lit by crystal chandeliers and with tables covered in immaculate white tablecloths. For Eliana, it was all just a status game, an opportunity to show off her superiority. Isabela, though elegantly dressed in a simple gown, felt out of place, a fish out of water in a world where she didn't belong. However, she knew that this night meant something more than the others could imagine. Isabela looked at the upper-class guests, all engaged in empty conversation, unaware of the talent that was about to be exposed. She wondered if she was ready. Her body trembled, her mind filled with doubts, but there was something inside her that refused to let this opportunity slip away. As she looked at the piano, the music she had always carried inside her but had never played again now seemed like an insistent voice, begging to be heard. Music had always been the truest reflection of who Isabela was. It was what connected her to her past, to her mother, and to her youthful dreams. Now, more than ever, she knew that playing wasn't just about impressing others. It was about finding herself, about freeing herself from the weight of fear and pain. Isabela wouldn't play for others. She would play for herself, to regain what life had almost taken from her. Nervousness tightened her chest. The gala was in full swing, and she approached the stage with hesitant steps. Everyone's gaze on her seemed too heavy. What did they expect of her? Would they see her as a fraud, a maid trying to imitate something that didn't belong to her? Isabela struggled with her fear, but when she reached the piano, something inside her ignited. There was no more room for doubt. The music began to take shape. Isabela sat down at the piano, feeling the weight of the room around her. The sheet music, now intact, lay before her, but her mind didn't need it. What she had chosen to play wasn't written on any piece of paper. It was a composition she carried within her, a fusion of her roots in classical and jazz. As her fingers began to play softly, the room was filled with a deep, heartfelt, and authentic melody. In the first few seconds, the audience seemed bewildered, the guests' vague glances turning curious. They expected something predictable, a simple classical piece. But what Isabela was playing defied those expectations. The melody was rich in emotion and complexity. Gradually, the murmurs ceased, and all eyes were fixed on the stage. The sound flowed with a visceral force that no one in the room could ignore. That music, without words, spoke directly to everyone's soul. At the back of the room, Leo Tucker, the mentor who believed in her, watched with his eyes closed, absorbing each chord as if it were a promise fulfilled. When the last note faded away, he was the first to stand up. The applause was timid at first, but soon turned into an emotional ovation. Leo, with tears in his eyes, knew that this was not just a performance. It was the rebirth of an artist who had been lost in time. The other guests began to applaud, first in shock, then in genuine admiration. Eliana, who had expected to laugh, was now paralyzed. Everyone's eyes were on Isabela, and for the first time that night, she felt no fear. The music was no longer a burden, but a liberation. She had overcome the pain, the shame, and had shown who she really was. The talent she had hidden for so long was now being recognized. Isabela finally allowed herself to be seen. Eliana watched silently as the ovation took over the room. She was stunned, unable to hide her surprise. Her attempt to humiliate Isabela had failed miserably. The contempt she felt for her seemed to crumble in the face of something more powerful, more real than her own arrogance. Isabela was no longer the invisible maid. She was someone, and deep down, Eliana had known it all along. The resentment was overwhelmed by a sense of defeat. Julian Kent, the critic who had long destroyed careers with his sharp words, was speechless. He didn't know how to react. This woman, whom he had judged as mere entertainment at the gala, had shattered all expectations. He couldn't ignore the raw talent he had just witnessed. What would he do now? Write another cruel review about the supposed performance of a maid? Or would he surrender to the power of that song? Isabela felt the change in herself as the room applauded. The music had freed her, not just from the eyes of an audience, but from a lifetime of invisibility. For so long, she had hidden behind her pain and fear. Now, with each round of applause, she allowed herself to be seen, finally recognizing her worth. The weight she carried dissipated, and the woman she had always been began to emerge, strong and free. As she left the stage, Isabela felt different. The shame that had once paralyzed her had been replaced by a newfound confidence. She had shown herself to the world, without masks, without fear. Leo stood beside her, smiling approvingly. "You did it, Isabela. Now the world knows who you are," he said. She felt the words like a seal of freedom. She promised herself she would never hide again. Her journey was just beginning. Alfonso Moretti watched the scene with a mixture of surprise and admiration. For the first time, he saw not just a maid, but a woman with immense talent that he had never recognized before. What was happening before his eyes was something he could not control or ignore. Isabela's transformation was not just about her music, but about her presence, her strength. He knew something had changed, but he did not yet understand what that meant. Eliana, realizing that her manipulation had failed, stepped away from the spotlight, trying to hide her frustration. Everything she had planned seemed to crumble in the face of Isabela's unexpected strength. Contempt and envy began to take on more intense forms. She felt defeated not only by Isabela's talent, but by the realization that she could no longer control her. The control she had over everyone around her, especially Isabela, was finally slipping through her fingers. After the performance, Leo approached Isabela with a proud smile on his face. "You finally found your way, my dear," he said. They embraced, and the connection between mentor and student was stronger than ever. Leo had always believed in her, but now he saw that Isabela had freed herself from her own chains. She was no longer an unfulfilled promise. She was an artist, ready to rediscover her own voice in the world. After years of suffering, Isabela finally felt true freedom. She knew that although the stage and music had set her free, her true path was yet to come. The night of the gala was a milestone, but not the end of her journey. With Leo by her side, she made a decision. She would no longer follow anyone's expectations, not even Alfonso's or Eliana's. Music would be hers, and she would use it to find herself, to live her life. Despite her growing confidence, Isabela knew that the real battle was yet to come. Music, the art she had abandoned for so long, was now calling her again. Recognition and acceptance were still so new, and the pressure to reintegrate into the music world was great. She needed to prove herself, not only to others, but to herself. The fear of rejection and failure still haunted her, but she could no longer run away from it. An invitation arrived for Isabela, unexpected and full of promise. The renowned New York Philharmonic Orchestra was interested in having her as a soloist for a special performance. The invitation, made by one of the most prestigious musicians, seemed unreal. Isabela hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision. It was a return to the world she thought she had lost forever, but it was also a chance to show the world what she was truly capable of. Doubts began to consume Isabela. She knew this opportunity was unique, but the responsibility and fear of failure still paralyzed her. The same girl who dreamed of the stage now found herself facing a choice that could change her life forever. Was she ready to return to the spotlight? The talent she possessed, the gift that had always defined her, was still there. But would it be enough to overcome her own fears? After days of anguish, Isabela made her decision. She could no longer live in the shadow of her own fears. Music was her true essence, and she should no longer run away from it. With a determined smile, she accepted the orchestra's invitation, ready to throw herself back into the world of music. The conductor, watching closely, knew that Isabela's talent was undeniable, but it remained to be seen whether she would be able to fully connect with the orchestra. Isabela felt the weight of expectations on her. The orchestra's invitation was a validation of her talent, but also a demand. She wanted to be perfect, not to fail again, not to disappoint those who still believed in her. But the pressure made her question every movement, every chord. The doubt that she might not be good enough, that time had caused her talent to fade, consumed her. How could she overcome this and show everyone who she really was? During the second rehearsal, something inside Isabela changed. As she played, she surrendered herself to the music in a way she never had before. The audience no longer existed, nor did the expectations of others. The only thing that mattered was her connection with the piano, with the melody. Her soul opened up, and she played with a freedom she had lost years ago. When the rehearsal ended, she smiled. Fear no longer had power over her. The journey had finally begun again. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs inspiration to fight for what is right. Sign up for more stories of transformation, and remember, respect and empathy have the power to transform lives. And never forget, don't underestimate anyone for what they appear to be.